When a teacher in a quiet suburban school notices that his top student has inexplicably sabotaged her own test, he assumes it's just a bad day. But as he presses for answers, one unsettling detail changes everything, setting off a chain of events that will test the bonds of trust, challenge the limits of a community, and place a vulnerable child in serious danger. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in the power of standing up for someone in need, give this story a like and subscribe for more. Mr. Lawson sat behind his desk in the hushed after-school glow of room 214. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting the chalkboard and the neatly arranged desks with long golden rays. Outside, a few lingering students laughed on their way to the buses, their voices echoing along the nearly empty corridors. The day's last bell had sounded almost 20 minutes earlier, but Mr. Lawson was in no hurry to leave. He'd stayed to finish grading the tests he had handed back just before the final bell. One paper in particular drew his troubled gaze: Sophie Parker's math test. The grade scrawled at the top was so shockingly low it looked like someone else's. She had left entire sections blank, and the questions she had attempted were riddled with bizarre mistakes, answers that made no sense for a student of her caliber. Sophie had always been the kind of student teachers dreamt about: bright, disciplined, a natural problem solver. She stayed after class to ask about extra practice worksheets, always did her homework thoroughly, and often breezed through advanced math concepts that stumped many of her classmates. Yet there it was, plain as day, a failing grade. Mr. Lawson felt a small knot of dread form in his chest. Something was off. When he flipped the test over, his suspicion only sharpened. The scratch work Sophie had done in the margins showed a hint of methodical logic, just enough to confirm she could have solved these problems if she had wanted to. He gathered the stack of graded tests, dropping Sophie's on top so he wouldn't forget to address it. As he did, his gaze snagged on a balled-up piece of paper poking out of the wastebasket near the window. It looked like the corner of a math worksheet, and the handwriting scrawled on it was suspiciously similar to Sophie's neat, looped style. On impulse, he rose and retrieved it, smoothing out the crumpled sheet. His breath caught. It was the real test, with every question correct and a perfect logic trail for each solution. The entire page was cross-hatched by eraser marks and darkly scribbled lines, as if Sophie had tried to destroy the evidence. She must have replaced it with that bizarre set of wrong answers before turning it in. She hadn't just done poorly on the real test. She had deliberately sabotaged herself. A slow, uneasy pulse of concern quickened in his blood. He had seen variations of this in his teaching career, students who faked ignorance or pretended to struggle, often driven by reasons that had nothing to do with the subject matter. Sometimes they were being bullied for being too smart. Other times there were problems at home that made them feel unsafe standing out academically. But the intensity of Sophie's sabotage, every single question wrong, plus the destroyed correct version, hinted at something more serious. He found it impossible to concentrate on the rest of the grading. He quickly plugged in final marks for the other tests, storing them in neat piles, but his mind kept circling back to Sophie. She was a quiet kid, though not shy in a typical way. She spoke freely in class when asked, participated in group work, and had a few close friends. Nothing about her had suggested a problem. But now he recalled small details that should have flagged his concern sooner. The tension in her posture, the bruise he saw on her wrist a couple of weeks ago, which she claimed was from a fall. The distant, guarded look in her eyes whenever her stepfamily came up in conversation. The next morning, before the first bell, Mr. Lawson waited by his classroom door. Students shuffled by in waves, many rubbing bleary eyes or clutching travel mugs of hot chocolate. Sophie finally appeared in the flow of bodies. Usually, she offered a polite smile, but now she avoided his gaze. She tried to slip into the room with her head down, but Mr. Lawson quietly asked if he could speak to her for a moment in the hall. Sophie's eyes flickered with apprehension. She glanced around, as though worried someone might notice. She mumbled something like, "Yes, sir," and followed him outside. The corridor was quieter now that most students had settled in their classes, though the sounds of footsteps and muffled chatter echoed from distant hallways. Mr. Lawson held the two tests, one correct, one full of deliberate mistakes, and gently asked her to explain. Sophie's chin dipped, and she clenched her fists at her sides. She offered a flimsy excuse about feeling ill, claiming she had panicked at test time. But her words were unconvincing, and her voice trembled in a way that betrayed deeper fear. He gave her a reassuring smile, telling her she wasn't in trouble. Then, in a voice as gentle as he could manage, he said something like, "Sophie, if there's anything making you feel unsafe, if you're worried about someone being angry at you for doing well, please know I want to help." She swallowed, and for a split second, she looked like she might open up. But then something behind her eyes shut down. She shook her head stiffly. "I'm fine, Mr. Lawson," she murmured. "I just messed up." He recognized the shutdown response. A wall going up, a fear that speaking too much would bring consequences she couldn't risk. He didn't press the matter. Instead, he let her go to her seat, telling her his door was always open. She nodded once, avoiding eye contact. That morning's lesson on geometry proceeded without incident, but Mr. Lawson watched her from the corner of his eye. She was quieter than usual. She barely looked up from her notebook, taking half-hearted notes. He noticed how she flinched slightly whenever a classmate's voice got loud. By the end of the period, he felt certain something was very wrong. In the days that followed, he grew more attuned to small telltale signs. How Sophie avoided group activities, how she seemed exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. Once or twice, he tried to casually ask her how she was doing, but she always offered non-committal answers. He checked her academic records, discovering that she had transferred to this district out of the blue the previous year, with minimal documentation. Her mother's name, Claire Parker, was listed, along with a stepfather, Dale Parker, and a stepbrother, Jake. No mention of her biological father. Mr. Lawson consulted the school nurse about Sophie's bruises, but the nurse only had vague notes of accidental slip, bruised knee, or wrist strain from a sports activity. None of it was conclusive, yet alarm bells clanged in his mind. He had taught long enough to sense the difference between normal childhood clumsiness and a pattern of concealed harm. He confided in Ms. Reyes, the guidance counselor, who was sympathetic but cautious. She agreed to talk to Sophie to see if she could glean any clues. After the session, Ms. Reyes reported that Sophie was polite but guarded, offering no sign of direct abuse. Ms. Reyes admitted, though, that she still felt uneasy. "It's like she's terrified of letting something slip," Ms. Reyes observed. "But I can't force her to open up. And without clear evidence, we can't do much." Mr. Lawson felt a creeping frustration. He knew that children in trouble often tried to hide it, especially if they feared retaliation at home. If Sophie was being threatened or hurt, she might think that telling anyone would only make matters worse. He decided to keep an eye on her, to gather what evidence he could. In class, he noticed she refused to do well on quizzes, deliberately missing easy questions. Yet, on her homework, which presumably she completed in her room in secret, she continued to demonstrate near-perfect mastery of the material. That disconnect only deepened his certainty that she was under some intense pressure to underperform publicly. Meanwhile, he also noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor. She no longer spoke freely in group discussions, no longer answered questions at the board. She seemed to want to vanish into the background. Once or twice, he overheard other students asking her for help, since she was known to be good at math. But Sophie brushed them off curtly, which was unlike her normal kind, helpful self. The more he watched, the more he realized that it wasn't just academic sabotage. She flinched when someone brushed by her in the hallway, yanked her arm away if a classmate tried to tap her on the shoulder. One afternoon, as he stood near the bus loop, he saw her stepbrother, Jake Parker, approach her. She paled at the sight of him, then hurried onto the bus without saying a word. Jake was in 7th grade, 2 years younger, and Mr. Lawson didn't teach him. But the surly scowl on the boy's face as he glared after Sophie made Mr. Lawson's skin prickle. He decided to talk with Sophie's mother or stepfather to see if anything at home could explain her behavior. He called the listed phone number and left a polite voicemail, asking them to come in for a parent-teacher conference. No one called back. He sent home a note in Sophie's backpack, but it went unanswered. Finally, he tried emailing. He got a single reply from Claire Parker, Sophie's mother, stating that their schedule was too busy at the moment, but that she'd be happy to reschedule in a month or two. The tone of the email was curt, defensive. As the weeks passed, Mr. Lawson's worry for Sophie escalated. She grew even more withdrawn, her eyes hollow, her shoulders perpetually tense. One day, he noticed a fresh bruise on her forearm, faint purple in color. He gently asked her if she was okay. She pulled her sleeve down hastily, turned away, and said nothing. That same day, after the dismissal bell, he discovered a torn piece of notebook paper in the trash can by her desk. It contained partial notes about some chores she needed to finish. Finish cleaning the kitchen before Jake gets home. Don't forget to wash the dishes. But scribbled at the bottom in a hurried, frantic scrawl was, try not to do better than Jake at school. The words made Mr. Lawson's stomach twist. So that was it. She was trying to avoid surpassing her stepbrother academically. If she did, there would be consequences. He mulled over the possibility that Jake might be pressuring her directly, maybe bullying her behind the scenes. But as he pieced together more observations, he suspected someone else was driving the fear. Perhaps the stepfather was punishing her for making Jake look bad. Possibly both mother and stepfather resented that she outshined the stepbrother. That speculation left him with a cold dread. If the parents were complicit, who could Sophie turn to? He tried speaking to Ms. Reyes again, sharing the new scraps of information he had found, but Ms. Reyes reminded him that without concrete evidence, visible injuries that Sophie confirmed were from abuse, or a direct admission from Sophie, Child Protective Services might not intervene. We can file a concern, but they'll investigate. If Sophie denies everything, it could go nowhere, Ms. Reyes said quietly. Mr. Lawson felt powerless. He watched Sophie come in each day looking more withdrawn, and he felt certain her situation was intensifying. Then, one afternoon, as he was gathering his belongings, he glanced out the window and saw Sophie sitting on the curb by the bus loop, long after everyone else had gone. She was hugging her knees, staring at the pavement with an expression of resignation. Concern gripped him. Why was she still there? He walked outside, approaching slowly, not wanting to startle her. When she noticed him, she quickly stood, brushing off her skirt as though embarrassed. He asked if she missed her bus. She mumbled that her stepfather was supposed to pick her up, but he hadn't arrived. She said it so quietly and warily that Mr. Lawson felt a protective surge in his chest. They waited a few more minutes in uncomfortable silence. Then a black sedan roared into the parking lot. The driver, a tall, broad-shouldered man, stepped out with a scowl on his face. He marched towards Sophie, not even acknowledging Mr. Lawson. He seized Sophie's wrist in a firm grip, muttering something under his breath. Mr. Lawson saw her wince. Before Mr. Lawson could intervene, the man turned and glared. "Who are you?" he barked. Mr. Lawson introduced himself politely as Sophie's math teacher, and the man identified himself as Dale Parker, her stepfather. Parker's voice was dripping with annoyance. "I got stuck in traffic," he said, jerking his head towards Sophie. "She knows not to wander off." Sophie lowered her eyes, not resisting as Parker tugged her along. Mr. Lawson found himself blurting. "She waited patiently right here. Are you both all right?" Parker narrowed his eyes, a flicker of aggression in his stare. "We're fine. Next time, keep your nose out of our family business." He opened the passenger door and practically shoved Sophie inside, then drove away, tires screeching. Mr. Lawson felt a chill linger in the air after the car disappeared. Sophie's expression of dread was etched into his mind. He knew with fresh certainty that something was gravely wrong. The following day, Sophie didn't show up to school, nor did she appear the next day or the day after that. Concerned, Mr. Lawson asked the office about her absence, but they only had a note from her mother claiming a family emergency. On the third day, near dismissal, Sophie finally appeared in the doorway. She looked pale, her eyes ringed with shadows, her arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage. Mr. Lawson rushed over, heart pounding, but the bell rang before he could ask her any questions. She slipped out into the hallway chaos. He managed to catch up with her by the lockers, gently touching her shoulder. She flinched, eyes darting anxiously. "Sophie," he whispered, "please tell me what's going on. Are you hurt? Do you need help?" She gave a barely perceptible shake of her head. "I'm fine," she insisted. Her voice was raw, as though she'd been crying. "Please, just stop asking." He felt an ache of frustration. "I just want you safe," he said softly. She mumbled, I can't. It'll get worse if I—" She caught herself, clamping her mouth shut. Then she turned and hurried away down the hall, leaving Mr. Lawson staring helplessly after her. He stayed at school late that evening, pacing in his classroom, trying to figure out the best course of action. He had a strong suspicion that Sophie was being abused at home, but she seemed too frightened to admit it. Child Services might come up empty-handed if Sophie denied everything in an official inquiry. Mr. Lawson also dreaded that if he made the wrong move, it could escalate the violence at home. That was when he saw something outside again, through the windows. Sophie, alone on a bench near the bus stop, legs drawn to her chest. The sun was dipping low, the sky a palette of pink and orange. He grabbed his jacket, his heart hammering. Stepping outside, he stood at a distance for a moment, observing Sophie's tense posture. A few minutes later, a black car pulled up, Sophie's stepfather. Mr. Lawson watched as the man got out. He walked over to Sophie, scowling, and seized her arm with the same roughness Mr. Lawson had witnessed before. She practically cringed. Something in Mr. Lawson snapped. Without a second thought, he strode forward. Dale Parker noticed him approach, and his grip on Sophie tightened. She gave a little whimper, but no words. Mr. Lawson forced a calm tone, though his heart roared in his ears. "Mr. Parker," he said, "is everything all right?" Parker glared daggers, snarling something about minding his own business. Mr. Lawson refused to back down. He gently but firmly stepped between Parker and Sophie, noticing the terror in her eyes. "I'd like to make sure Sophie is safe," he said, voice unshaking. Parker's eyes blazed with anger. "Don't tell me how to raise my kid. You have no right. Move." He tried to yank Sophie away, but Mr. Lawson stood his ground. Sophie's breathing turned shallow, as though she expected violence at any moment. Mr. Lawson realized that if Parker assaulted him right now, there were still staff members around. Parker might not risk making a scene in front of potential witnesses. Mr. Lawson said, "I think Sophie should stay with me this evening. I'll call her mother, of course, but she looks unwell, and she's clearly frightened. If there's a misunderstanding, we can sort it out calmly." Parker's face contorted with barely contained rage. For a split second, it seemed he might lash out. But then he glanced over Mr. Lawson's shoulder, noticing a custodian watching from the doorway. Parker's nostrils flared, and he spat, "You'll regret this." He let go of Sophie with a violent jerk, stormed back to his car, and sped off. Sophie stood trembling, tears shining in her eyes. Mr. Lawson put a gentle hand on her shoulder. She said nothing, but her gaze contained a mixture of terror and relief. He led her inside to the guidance office. By then, Ms. Reyes was gone, so Mr. Lawson called the principal at home, explaining the situation. The principal, alarmed, told him to contact Child Protective Services and the police, which he did. That night, as darkness fell, uniformed officers arrived at the school. Sophie finally broke down, tears streaming, and recounted the abuse she had endured for months. How her stepfather beat her whenever she outperformed her stepbrother, humiliating her, threatening to do worse if she ever told a soul. Her mother, paralyzed by fear, never intervened. Sometimes she even seemed to blame Sophie for provoking her stepfather's anger. Mr. Lawson's heart twisted with sorrow and fury, hearing how a child so bright and full of promise had been living in terror. The police took statements, and Child Protective Services placed Sophie in emergency foster care that night. Mr. Lawson stayed by her side until she was taken away, promising to follow up and do whatever he could to keep her safe. She clung to his hand before leaving, whispering a shaky thank you. The next day, the principal held an emergency meeting with staff. The entire school reeled from the revelation. Some teachers realized they had overlooked subtle signs. Sophie's withdrawn demeanor, her sudden refusal to participate in clubs. A wave of guilt rippled through the faculty. Mr. Lawson, though relieved Sophie was now out of immediate harm's way, felt a cold tension in his gut. He suspected that Dale Parker would not give up easily. Sure enough, when the police tried to locate Parker for questioning, they found the house empty. Parker, his son Jake, and even Sophie's mother, Claire, had vanished overnight. Child Protective Services informed the school that they had an open case on Sophie's stepfather, but that he had no prior convictions. He had a known temper, but little was on record beyond a dismissed domestic disturbance complaint from years prior. The authorities put out a bulletin, but Parker wasn't considered a high-profile criminal, so the search seemed less urgent than Mr. Lawson thought it should be. In the weeks that followed, Sophie settled into a temporary foster home. Mr. Lawson visited her regularly, bringing homework assignments, books, and small gifts like puzzle sets or interesting math challenges to keep her mind engaged. Though she was safe from immediate harm, she remained skittish, prone to nightmares, and mistrustful of new adults. She confided in Mr. Lawson that she was petrified her stepfather would find her. One evening, after a particularly difficult visit, Mr. Lawson returned to his quiet apartment, shoulders heavy with worry. He lived alone, divorced years ago with no children of his own, and found himself longing to do more to protect Sophie. She deserved a stable, supportive home, not a life in the foster system. The very thought unsettled him, and he tried to push it away, telling himself he was just her math teacher, not a father figure. Yet the ache remained. Weeks passed with no sign of Dale Parker or Jake. The authorities suspected Parker might have fled the state. The local news ran a brief segment on the case, featuring a blurred photo of Parker's driver's license, labeling him wanted for child abuse. But after the initial wave of coverage, attention faded. Mr. Lawson's fears, however, never fully subsided. Then, one night, as he stayed late again to prep a geometry lesson, a janitor rushed into his classroom looking alarmed. "There's a car in the back lot. Somebody's messing with your car, I think," the janitor said breathlessly. Mr. Lawson hurried outside. The winter wind cut into him, and darkness cloaked the parking lot except for a single flickering street lamp. He saw his sedan, parked in the corner, with its hood open and the lights flashing. His first thought was that someone was trying to break in or sabotage his engine. Heart pounding, he approached cautiously, the janitor trailing behind him. He heard footsteps scuffing on the asphalt. Then, from behind the next row of cars, Dale Parker emerged, a chilling sneer twisting his features. "Looking for me?" Parker hissed. Mr. Lawson's blood went cold. Parker had somehow slipped back into town. The man advanced, fists clenched, rage gleaming in his eyes. "You stuck your nose where it didn't belong," he snarled. Mr. Lawson glanced around for help. The janitor took a step back, clearly intimidated by Parker's threatening manner. Mr. Lawson tried to keep his voice steady. "You need to leave," he said firmly. "The police are looking for you. You can't come here." Parker let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I know they're looking for me. You think you're some hero saving that brat? She's my daughter now. You had no right." Mr. Lawson gritted his teeth, anger mixing with fear. "She's a child you were hurting." Before he could say more, Parker lunged. The blow caught Mr. Lawson off guard, smashing into his shoulder. He staggered back, nearly losing his balance. The janitor shouted in alarm. Parker pressed forward, swinging again. Mr. Lawson ducked, adrenaline kicking in. He wasn't a fighter, but he'd taken a few self-defense classes. He managed to block the next strike, stepping sideways to keep distance. The confrontation was chaotic. The squeal of the car alarm, the shuffle of feet on cold asphalt, the janitor fumbling for his phone to call 911. Parker roared curses, lunging again, his fists swinging wildly. Mr. Lawson tried to dodge, but one blow caught him in the side of the face, pain exploding behind his cheekbone. He reeled, fighting to remain upright, his vision swimming. Parker grabbed the collar of Mr. Lawson's jacket and yanked, snarling, "Where is she? Where's Sophie?" Mr. Lawson twisted away, gasping. "You'll never see her again," he snapped, spitting blood onto the ground. Parker's eyes narrowed with murderous intent. He raised his fist again, but sirens began wailing in the distance, the glow of approaching police lights flickering against the side of the school building. Parker hesitated, glancing around like a cornered animal. Then he swore under his breath, released Mr. Lawson, and made a dash for his own vehicle parked behind the dumpsters. He peeled out of the lot just as the police cars screeched in. Officers rushed forward, finding Mr. Lawson bruised, the janitor shaken. Within moments, they fanned out, trying to chase Parker's fleeing car, but it vanished into the night. This incident elevated Parker's status from a local suspect to a more serious fugitive. The police turned more resources to finding him, suspecting he might be armed or at least extremely dangerous. They interviewed Mr. Lawson in detail, took pictures of his injuries, and promised to keep an eye on the school. News of the attack rattled the community. Sophie, upon hearing it, dissolved into tears, blaming herself for Mr. Lawson's injuries. "He's furious because of me," she whispered during a phone call. "I knew he'd come after you." Mr. Lawson tried to reassure her, telling her it wasn't her fault, that Parker was responsible for his own violence. Still, she seemed racked by guilt. In the following days, the local news picked up the story again. Fugitive stepfather assaults local teacher. The headlines read, "There was renewed urgency to the manhunt." Tips poured in, some claiming sightings of Parker's car at rest stops or near certain highways. Police canvassed areas, but Parker proved elusive. Meanwhile, Sophie remained under tight protective measures, her foster family carefully guarding her location. Mr. Lawson visited her as often as the arrangement allowed, sometimes accompanied by a social worker. He noticed that, despite her lingering fear, she began to show signs of relief that the truth was out in the open. She no longer had to pretend to fail tests or hide bruises. She began timidly exploring hobbies she'd been forbidden to have, like reading advanced math books, practicing chess, or simply speaking her mind. Yet there was no guarantee Parker wouldn't strike again. Mr. Lawson confided in Ms. Reyes, revealing that he couldn't sleep at night, haunted by the possibility of Parker cornering Sophie somewhere. Ms. Reyes urged him to trust the police process, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to protect Sophie personally. A month after the assault, the lead detective, Officer Hernandez, called Mr. Lawson to say they had located Claire Parker in a motel 2 states away. She was alone, frantic, claiming Parker had forced her to run, then abandoned her. She professed ignorance about his current whereabouts, crying that she wanted to see Sophie. Child Protective Services, wary of Claire's complicity, insisted on formal evaluations before any mother-daughter reunions. The tension only escalated. In the midst of these developments, Mr. Lawson found himself pulled into another emotional challenge. His own mother had fallen ill, and he needed to visit her in a neighboring city. Torn between worry for Sophie and duty to his family, he spent weekends driving back and forth, trying to hold everything together. This became an unspoken subplot in his life, a personal struggle that weighed on him. Each time he left town, he feared Parker might resurface. Meanwhile, Ms. Reyes discovered a new piece of information. Parker had a prior domestic violence charge in another county, long sealed, which suggested a pattern of abuse. The charge had been dropped due to lack of witness cooperation, perhaps the same dynamic of intimidation that Sophie and her mother experienced. This evidence bolstered the push to find him, but it also cast a darker shadow. The man was more dangerous than anyone realized. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Mr. Lawson wrapped up a staff meeting, he received a trembling text from the foster mother caring for Sophie. The message read, "Sophie says she saw someone watching her from a car when they went to the grocery store. She's terrified it's Parker." Mr. Lawson's pulse thundered. He relayed the information to Officer Hernandez, who promised to investigate. But fear gnawed at Mr. Lawson's nerves. He visited Sophie that evening, bringing her a small gift, a logic puzzle book and a bright pink pen. She forced a smile, hugging him quickly. Over Coco in the living room, she confessed she thought she recognized Parker's silhouette behind the wheel of a parked car. She didn't get the plate number, and when she left the store, the car was gone. Mr. Lawson tried to keep his voice steady. "We'll let the police handle it. I promise no one will let him hurt you again." Sophie clutched the puzzle book to her chest, tears brimming in her eyes. "I just want him to go to jail forever," she whispered. In the following days, detectives combed through parking lot security footage but found no conclusive evidence. The tension soared. Mr. Lawson felt a constant sense of dread, as though Parker might materialize any second. He took to glancing over his shoulder, checking his rearview mirror whenever he drove home. He even installed a new security system at his apartment. Autumn gave way to winter, the days growing shorter. Mr. Lawson noticed Sophie's resilience. With therapy and the support of her foster parents, she slowly regained some confidence. She started joking with classmates again, though she remained somewhat skittish. When Mr. Lawson asked if she wanted to rejoin the math club, her eyes lit up, but she hesitated, as if still haunted by the notion that excelling might endanger her. Finally, she agreed to try. Seeing her present at the math club's first meeting of the new session felt like a small triumph. She solved complex problems with a trembling smile, and her classmates offered shy encouragement. Mr. Lawson found his heart swelling with pride at her courage. Then, just as the holiday break approached, the police received an anonymous tip that Parker was hiding out in an abandoned property on the outskirts of the city. Officers raided the place, but Parker was gone. They found signs someone had been squatting there. Leftover food wrappers, a makeshift bedroll, some old clothes. Disturbingly, they also found scribbled notes referencing Sophie's schedule. The place had newspaper clippings about the incident, and even a battered printout of Mr. Lawson's staff profile from the school website. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. There was no question Parker was stalking them, waiting for an opportunity. The school board arranged extra security patrols. Sophie's foster family installed cameras around their property. Mr. Lawson began to wonder if Parker was playing a twisted game, determined to exact revenge. As winter break began, Sophie's foster parents decided to leave town briefly, hoping a change of scenery would ease her anxiety. Mr. Lawson supported that decision, but he felt uneasy about the distances involved. They planned to stay with relatives in another state, location undisclosed to anyone but the authorities, to minimize the risk of Parker tracking them. Sophie left with a tearful hug, promising to stay in contact. Mr. Lawson spent the break quietly, visiting his mother in the hospital and trying to quell his own nightmares about Parker. He told himself the police had to catch Parker eventually. The man couldn't hide forever, but the frustration mounted each day that Parker remained free. Just after New Year's, a break in the case finally occurred. A state trooper near the southern border pulled over a speeding car and discovered Jake Parker driving without a license, but no sign of Dale Parker in the vehicle. Jake was taken into custody, sullen and uncooperative, refusing to say where his father was. The trooper found an unregistered gun under the passenger seat, intensifying the charges. Jake's arrest sparked a wave of speculation. Had Parker sent his son on an errand? Had they separated for some reason? The authorities pressed Jake for information about his father's whereabouts, but the boy said nothing except curses and claims that the police had no right to keep him. He was placed in a juvenile detention facility, and the manhunt for Parker intensified. The public began paying more attention now that a minor was arrested with a firearm, raising fear that Parker might be planning something more violent. Mr. Lawson found himself fielding phone calls from anxious parents, worried about their own children's safety. The local news updated the story nightly, urging viewers to report any sightings. It happened on a cold, windy night at the end of January. Mr. Lawson was in his apartment, grading a backlog of tests, when he heard a car alarm shrieking from the street below. His adrenaline surged. Memories of Parker's last ambush in the school parking lot surfaced vividly. He hurried to the window. His own car's lights were flashing in the gloom. He rushed downstairs, heart pounding. Outside, the wind whipped through the empty street, carrying leaves and scraps of paper. He found his car's alarm blaring, but no visible signs of damage. As he turned the alarm off, scanning the shadows, a figure stepped out from behind a parked van. The streetlight glinted off the man's features, and Mr. Lawson's stomach plummeted. Dale Parker stood there, face contorted with hate. Mr. Lawson's breath caught. "How did you?" Parker lunged, a flash of metal in his hand. Mr. Lawson barely managed to jerk aside. The object, a small crowbar or pry bar, whistled past his ear. Mr. Lawson stumbled backwards, fumbling for his phone in his jacket pocket. Parker advanced, brandishing the weapon. "You think you can hide her from me?" Parker growled, voice ragged. "I'll make you pay for what you did." Mr. Lawson's mind raced. There was no one else around. The nearest neighbor was half a block away. He had to defend himself. He tried to keep a car between them, circling, but Parker circled too, cornering him. Mr. Lawson's phone slipped from his trembling hands, landing on the asphalt. Parker snarled, slashing the crowbar through the air again. Mr. Lawson ducked, feeling it graze his hair. Desperate, he grabbed a piece of broken brick from the curb. Parker lunged once more, and Mr. Lawson swung the brick in a clumsy arc, striking Parker's arm. Parker roared in pain, the crowbar clattering to the ground. For a moment, Mr. Lawson thought he might have gained the upper hand, but Parker recovered, driving his shoulder into Mr. Lawson's chest. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he stumbled back, cracking his elbow against his car door. A flash of agony shot up his arm. Parker seized Mr. Lawson by his collar, pinning him against the car. "Where is she?" he spat. Mr. Lawson mustered what breath he could. "You'll never touch her again," he croaked. He clawed at Parker's grip, tears of pain clouding his eyes. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. The repeated beep of a cell phone's emergency dial tone sounded from somewhere on the ground. Mr. Lawson realized the phone must have automatically called the last number he'd typed, a half-dialed 911 call. Parker hesitated, cursing. The flicker of red and blue lights swept across the buildings at the end of the street. Parker released Mr. Lawson with a snarl, searching for the crowbar. But the sirens were almost upon them, so he sprinted down the street. Mr. Lawson collapsed to his knees, gasping. Moments later, 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt, officers jumping out with guns drawn. Mr. Lawson pointed shakily in the direction Parker had fled. They gave chase, and for a tense few minutes, Mr. Lawson lay on the asphalt, half-dazed. Another wave of officers arrived, kneeling beside him, checking his injuries. All around them, the swirling lights cast a surreal pattern on the pavement. Eventually, he heard shouts from down the block and the crackle of police radios. An officer returned, breathless, announcing, "We got him." Mr. Lawson exhaled a tremulous sigh of relief, tears of exhaustion wetting his cheeks. The fight was finally over. In the hours that followed, paramedics checked Mr. Lawson's bruises. His elbow throbbed painfully, and he had a gash on his forehead, but nothing life-threatening. More importantly, Parker was in custody, forcibly subdued after attempting to run. The crowbar lay where it had fallen, marked as evidence. By midnight, the news of Parker's capture spread. Mr. Lawson sat in a hospital exam room, feeling an overwhelming mix of relief, gratitude, and residual shock. Detective Hernandez arrived, offering a respectful nod. "He's being processed now. We found a stolen vehicle nearby. He's going away for a long time, especially with the assault charges." Mr. Lawson nodded, relief coursing through him. But his thoughts drifted immediately to Sophie. She was safe, truly safe now, and that was all that mattered. When Sophie learned of Parker's arrest, she burst into tears, though this time they were tears of relief. She came out of hiding and returned to the city, accompanied by her foster mother and social worker. Seeing Mr. Lawson in a sling for his injured elbow made her tear up again, guilt crossing her face. He reassured her that none of this was her fault. "It was all on him," Mr. Lawson insisted. "He would have done this no matter who tried to protect you." Over the subsequent weeks, the legal processes churned forward. Claire Parker, found at that distant motel, faced her own reckoning for failing to protect Sophie. She initially begged for custody, claiming she'd been a victim too, but Child Protective Services remained skeptical, noting she had never actively sought help for Sophie or herself. The courts placed Sophie in extended foster care, with the possibility of adoption if a suitable family member or sponsor stepped up. Sophie seemed adrift in all this. Though physically safe, the emotional scars ran deep. She attended therapy sessions. She made slow but steady progress in rejoining her normal life at school. The teachers supported her, offering encouragement. Friends who once wondered why she pushed them away now rallied around her, giving her a sense of belonging she had never really known. Mr. Lawson, healing from his injuries, tried to give her space while remaining a steadfast presence. He offered her extra help if she needed it, but more often than not, they just talked about everyday things, her favorite books, her dreams of going to a science camp someday. She opened up more each day, a gentle thaw of the fear that once gripped her. Then came the moment that Mr. Lawson never could have predicted. He found himself sitting across from a social worker, Ms. Griffin, who casually asked if he had ever considered being a foster parent. She explained that Sophie needed a permanent guardian. She had no extended family to take her in, and the girl had expressed how Mr. Lawson felt like a safe person. Ms. Griffin assured him there was a formal process, background checks, home visits, training, and that he didn't have to commit to adoption immediately. But if he was open to it, it could change Sophie's life. At first, Mr. Lawson was overwhelmed. He was a single man in his early 40s, a dedicated teacher, set in his ways. Becoming a foster parent or even an adoptive parent wasn't something he had planned. But he realized that a surge of protectiveness and affection for Sophie had taken root in him from the moment he discovered her sabotage. Days turned into weeks as he pondered the idea. He consulted Ms. Reyes, who was supportive. He spoke to the principal, concerned about any conflict of interest. The principal assured him that while it was unusual, it wasn't against any rule so long as it was handled ethically. He had long phone calls with the social worker, learning the intricacies of fostering and the possibility of adoption if all went well. Finally, one evening, he visited Sophie at her foster home. They walked in the backyard, the sun dipping low. Sophie confided that she was worried about moving again, that she yearned for stability. Mr. Lawson gently told her about the idea the social worker had suggested, that if she felt comfortable, she could come stay with him, initially as a foster arrangement, to see if it was a good fit. Sophie looked stunned, tears brimming in her eyes, and asked if he really meant it. He nodded, voice trembling, telling her he wanted her to have a safe and loving place to grow up. Within a few months, the arrangements were finalized. Mr. Lawson went through every background check, home inspection, and training session. Finally, on a bright spring morning, a car pulled up outside his modest apartment, and Sophie stepped out with the social worker. He ushered her inside, showing her the room he'd prepared. A cozy space with a new bedspread, a desk for her homework, a small bookshelf already lined with math puzzle books. Sophie walked around in disbelief, tears in her eyes. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, a place where she could finally breathe without fear. The first few weeks were a learning curve for both of them. Mr. Lawson discovered that parenting a traumatized child required patience, empathy, and structure. Sophie woke up from nightmares, sometimes lashing out or crying inconsolably. He soothed her, comforting her with warm tea and gentle words. They navigated everyday routines, morning breakfasts, drives to school, though Sophie was in a different grade level, so he couldn't exactly drive her daily without juggling his own schedule, but he found solutions. Through it all, they grew closer, forging an unspoken bond of trust. As the summer approached, Parker's trial took place. Sophie testified, her voice shaking but resolute. The court listened to her account of beatings and psychological torment. Mr. Lawson watched from the gallery, heart pounding with sympathy and pride at her courage. The jury returned a guilty verdict, sentencing Parker to a long prison term on multiple counts of child abuse and assault. Sophie's final confrontation with her abuser, even in court, lifted a weight from her soul. With Parker behind bars, Sophie's path to healing cleared. She and Mr. Lawson formed routines that resembled a real family. Dinners cooked together, laughter at the silly dog videos she found on the internet, weekends exploring the local park. She still had therapy, slowly unraveling the lingering anxiety and guilt. But each day, her smile grew more genuine, her posture more relaxed. One evening, as they did the dishes side by side, Sophie washing, Mr. Lawson drying, she looked up at him and said in a small voice, "I know you're not my real dad, but I want to stay." Her eyes were brimming with tears. I'd like to call you Dad someday if that's okay." He nearly dropped the plate he was holding. Emotion surged in him, and he pulled her into a hug, telling her he would be honored. They both cried for a moment, letting the warm kitchen lights cast a gentle glow on this quiet moment of acceptance. A few months later, the adoption became official. It wasn't without scrutiny. Adoption by a single teacher of one of his own former students drew some raised eyebrows. But the thorough vetting by the social worker, plus Sophie's unwavering statement that she felt safest with Mr. Lawson, convinced the court. On a sunny day in family court, the judge finalized the adoption, allowing Sophie to take the last name Lawson if she wished. She did. Walking out of the courthouse, father and daughter took a picture together. Sophie clung to Mr. Lawson's side, an unbridled grin on her face. She had a new birth certificate, a new sense of identity, and a hopeful future stretching ahead. Mr. Lawson's heart overflowed with gratitude. Life settled into a new rhythm. Sophie thrived, continuing therapy, delving deeper into her love for mathematics, and even joining a community robotics club. She graduated middle school with high marks, the shame and fear of her stepfather's abuse largely replaced by cautious optimism and budding self-confidence. Mr. Lawson, for his part, discovered a depth of purpose he had never known. After so many years dedicated to teaching children, he now had a child of his own to guide and love unconditionally. They still had challenges. Sophie's nightmares didn't vanish overnight. Sometimes, she struggled with sudden anxiety if she encountered strangers who resembled Parker. But with every instance, Mr. Lawson stood by her, reinforcing that she was safe, that no one would ever hurt her again. The memory of that final confrontation in the parking lot, of Parker's chilling rage, lingered in Mr. Lawson's mind. But now it served as a testament to how far he was willing to go to protect Sophie. And as time moved forward, the two of them kept forging new memories that dwarfed the old traumas. Vacation photos, random father-daughter jokes, encouragement as she tackled advanced math tournaments, and supportive hugs whenever she felt uncertain about her past. A few teachers at the school jokingly teased Mr. Lawson about never expecting to be a dad, let alone under such dramatic circumstances. He took it with good humor, but in quiet moments he acknowledged how much the experience changed him. He had seen cruelty up close, recognized the failings of a system that sometimes left children vulnerable, and chosen to do something about it. Over time, the rest of the staff recognized Sophie as Mr. Lawson's daughter. The initial gossip died down, replaced by genuine goodwill. Sophie herself displayed remarkable resilience. She joined a local volunteering club, wanting to help other children who might be in difficult family situations. She befriended classmates who struggled academically, tutoring them with the patient instruction that Mr. Lawson once gave to her. Occasionally, though, she voiced regrets about her mother, Claire. She wondered if her mother truly was a victim, too paralyzed to act. She asked if it would ever be possible to reconnect. Mr. Lawson left that decision to Sophie and the social workers, but deep down he was wary. Claire had never reached out in a sincere attempt to fix the damage she allowed to happen. For now, the matter remained unresolved. Months turned into a year and then two. Sophie blossomed in high school, taking advanced placement classes in math and science, even winning a spot at a prestigious academic camp one summer. Mr. Lawson beamed as she proudly accepted a small scholarship. Meanwhile, Dale Parker's prison sentence continued, with no chance of early parole. One evening, after a particularly tiring day at school, father and daughter sat on the couch, sharing a bucket of popcorn and watching a movie about a girl who overcame adversity to become a champion chess player. The parallels were clear. The main character had endured hardships but found solace in intellectual pursuits. Partway through, Sophie paused the movie, turning to Mr. Lawson. she said softly. If you hadn't stopped him that day, I might still be stuck, failing every test just to survive. Mr. Lawson put an arm around her shoulders. I wish I could have helped you sooner. She shook her head, tears gathering. You still did more than anyone else. You believed me. You saw the signs. They let the moment linger. The movie paused on the screen. The warmth of the lamp in the living room cast their shadows softly on the wall. It was a testament to how far they'd come. Ultimately, the nightmares receded, replaced by a real home, a new family bond, and a sense of belonging. Sophie continued therapy, but the therapist noted her resilience and healthy coping strategies. She felt confident enough to share her story with a small circle of friends, hoping to encourage anyone else trapped in abuse to speak up. On a balmy spring day near the end of Sophie's sophomore year, Mr. Lawson invited Ms. Reyes and a few close colleagues over for a barbecue to celebrate Sophie's good report card. Sophie glowed under their praise, laughing with a lightness that once seemed impossible. At some point, Ms. Reyes caught Mr. Lawson's eye and smiled knowingly. She remembered how worried and powerless he once felt, and now she saw the tangible result of his bravery, perseverance, and compassion. Later that night, as the house quieted, Sophie rummaged in a drawer and found the old math test, the one she had destroyed and replaced with wrong answers. Mr. Lawson had kept the scraps, taped them together, and tucked them away. She brought it to him, her expression contemplative. "Can I throw this away for good?" she asked. He studied the piece of paper that had once signaled her desperate cry for help. He nodded, and they went outside to a small fire pit, lighting it with a match. Together, they watched the test burn, the edges curling into ash. It was a solemn moment, marking the end of a chapter defined by fear. The future belonged to them now. They walked back inside, hand in hand, both smiling. For Mr. Lawson, adopting Sophie was more than an act of rescue. It became a transformative step in his life, filling a void he hadn't realized was there. For Sophie, it was the start of a genuine second chance, living proof that stepping out of the darkness of abuse could lead to a world of safety and love. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already and subscribe for more. When a cautious 6-year-old shuffles into room 14 every morning, barely meeting anyone's eyes, it seems like just another quiet student trying to find her place. But one day, her uneven pigtails and sudden flinches hint at a deeper concern, setting off a series of small discoveries that lead a humble classroom aide into a tense mission to save a child from unseen harm. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you believe a single gentle voice can change a life, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Miss C was the quiet classroom aide in room 14 at Willow Creek Elementary. She wasn't a teacher, not a counselor, just the extra set of hands meant to help keep first graders on track. Passing out worksheets, readying shoelaces, wiping tears when someone fell on the playground. She had started working there about 4 years earlier, after a period of drifting between part-time tutoring jobs and assisting in after-school programs. Something about the calm routine of an elementary school, despite its occasional chaos, drew her in. She liked knowing that every day began with the bell at exactly 8:10, that snack time arrived at 9:45, and that by 3 o'clock, the halls would empty into a hush. Within those predictable rhythms, she found purpose. Her real name was Claire, but almost no one called her that. Teachers referred to her as Miss C. The children simply parroted what they heard, so Miss C followed her around like a gentle echo. She didn't mind. It made her sound approachable, less formal. People often overlooked her presence. She was small, with short brown hair pinned back in a low ponytail, and she spoke softly, rarely raising her voice above the din of an active classroom. She was an observer by nature, the type to notice which child was scribbling aimlessly on a worksheet because they didn't understand a single word of it, or which child lingered awkwardly at the back of a line, uncertain where to stand. She took pride in quietly stepping in before a child's frustration or confusion escalated into tears. She didn't decorate the walls or run any big projects of her own. That was the teacher's domain. Instead, she specialized in making sure nobody felt left behind. If a child stared blankly at their math sheet, Miss C would kneel beside them, gently talk them through the first problem, then watch as the spark of comprehension lit their eyes. She believed in the small, unheralded moments that added up to a child's success. In her experience, it was often the children who never asked for help that needed it the most. Early in September, a few weeks into the new school year, she first noticed Harper. The class had about 30 kids, a swirl of personalities and noise, and it always took a bit of time to memorize each face. But Harper stood out precisely because she seemed determined not to. She was small for a 6-year-old, with pigtails that never quite matched in length, as though someone had tied them hastily. She wore shoes that looked a size too big, the soles flapping slightly on the linoleum floor. She never laughed or smiled widely, never raised her hand, never joined the other children playing. Instead, she hovered near the edges of activity, watching but never quite engaging. For the first week or so, Miss C thought maybe Harper was shy. Many children took time to adjust to new surroundings. But after 2 weeks, she realized Harper's behavior went beyond ordinary shyness. During story time, when the class gathered on the rug in a circle for read aloud, Harper never sat down. She stood at the back, arms folded over her torso, eyes flicking from side to side. Miss C tried to coax her into sitting once or twice, but Harper quietly shook her head, offering no explanation. She just kept standing as though bracing herself. Miss C also noticed that Harper flinched whenever someone brushed past her back. It wasn't dramatic, just the tiniest jerk of her shoulders, a sudden tension in her posture. The teacher, Ms. Allen, didn't seem concerned. Her foster file says she struggles with boundaries. Ms. Allen had explained with a shrug. She's had a few placements. Probably just needs time. Let her be, Miss C. The aide respected Ms. Allen. She was a competent teacher with a friendly manner. But Miss C felt an uneasy pang each time she observed Harper's posture. This child didn't just act shy. She acted guarded, as if contact with others might be dangerous. Miss C made a mental note to watch more carefully. It was the last week of September when the school had its first fire drill of the year. The alarm blared mid-morning, sending children tumbling off the rug with squeals of excitement or panic. Miss C and Ms. Allen shepherded them into 2 lines, hurrying them toward the exit. In the commotion, Miss C spotted Harper trailing at the very back, her movements stiff and jerky. She didn't run like the others. She walked carefully, almost wincing each time her hips shifted. Miss C caught a glimpse of something red near Harper's waistband, but couldn't see clearly in the chaos. Outside, as the class lined up on the playground, Miss C kept an eye on Harper. The child stood very still, arms pinned at her sides. When Miss Allen did a head count, Harper barely lifted her gaze. Once they got the all clear to return inside, Miss C made sure to walk behind Harper, anxious to see if she favored one leg or if there was some sign of discomfort. She noticed Harper's gait seemed more rigid than normal, as though she were bracing each footstep. After they returned to the classroom, Miss C decided to check on Harper. During the transition period, children milled about, chattering about the fire drill. Miss C found Harper near the coat hooks, tugging on her oversized shoes. The aide knelt down. "You okay, sweetheart? You walked kind of funny out there. Did you trip or anything?" Harper froze, eyes downcast, then shook her head. Miss C tried again. "You never sit during story time either. Does your back hurt? Or your legs?" Harper tugged at her leggings in a small, nervous gesture. Then, in the faintest whisper, she said, "It stings if I sit too long." Miss C felt her stomach twist. She asked softly, "Why does it sting?" But Harper just dropped her gaze further, refusing to answer. Miss C glimpsed a flicker of fear in those eyes, a fear she recognized from other children she'd met who carried invisible wounds. She didn't push. Instead, she gave Harper's shoulder a gentle pat and let it be. Later, at home, she wrote down the date, time, and Harper's exact words in a little notebook she kept for personal records. She had learned that if something was amiss, It helped to have precise notes in case she needed to approach the administration or social services. The next morning, Miss C approached the school nurse, Ms. Valentine, a practical woman in her 50s who had seen it all. Broken bones, allergic reactions, emotional meltdowns. Miss C explained her concern that Harper might have some injury or condition causing pain when she sat. Ms. Valentine agreed to call Harper in during recess. 10 minutes later, the nurse emerged, shrugging. I checked her midsection. She's got a little redness where the waistband might be rubbing, probably from a tag or something. Doesn't look like anything serious. I told her to wear a looser waistband. That's about it. Miss C didn't argue, but a knot of unease formed in her chest. She sensed it was more than just a scratch from a tag. She resolved to keep watching. Over the following days, she documented every incident. The flinches, the stiff posture, the way Harper never leaned back against a chair. She noticed patterns, too. On Fridays, Harper seemed especially tense, as if anticipating something. By Monday, she often limped or walked stiffly. Then the cycle repeated. Miss C suspected that something was happening over the weekend, some form of discipline or punishment that left Harper hurting. But she had no proof. Weeks passed, and Miss C tried to gently draw Harper out. She sat beside her when she worked on coloring sheets, offering small compliments. You use beautiful colors, she might say. That tree looks so real. Harper would nod, a flicker of warmth in her eyes, but rarely spoke more than a sentence. Miss C noticed that whenever she reached out to adjust a pencil in Harper's hand or to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, Harper stiffened. The child seemed unaccustomed to gentle touch. Ms. Allen repeated her refrain. It's in her file. She's in foster care. Some kids are just jumpy. But Miss C believed it was more than typical foster child wariness. She recalled one instance where a classmate bumped into Harper's side, and Harper yelped, startled. The other child apologized, but Harper shrank away, as though expecting a blow. Miss C swallowed her concern and kept taking notes. She told herself that if she found enough small clues, maybe she could convince someone to look deeper. One Monday in late October, Miss C noticed Harper was walking particularly stiffly, her arms tight around her torso. During free reading, Harper bent to tie her shoelaces, wincing. Miss C crouched beside her, whispering, Are you hurting? This time, Harper hesitated, then lifted the hem of her t-shirt just a fraction. Miss C saw purple welts crisscrossing Harper's lower back, some fresh, some faded. She caught a glimpse of a scabbed line, and something else that made her breath catch. Faint black marker, partially faded, forming a countdown. 10, 9, 8. She couldn't read the rest, but the sight alone was enough to leave her shaken. Harper, Miss C managed in a low, urgent tone. What is this? Harper lowered her shirt immediately, glancing around to make sure no one saw. She didn't cry or tremble. Instead, her voice came out dull, resigned. She counts. If I don't say sorry before 0, she starts over. Miss C felt a cold wave of anger and dread. Who does? She asked, but Harper pressed her lips tight, refusing to speak. Miss C realized she had to tread carefully. If she pushed too hard, she might scare Harper off. She gently laid a hand on the child's shoulder. It's okay. I hear you, she said softly. Then she let Harper return to her seat. That night, Miss C poured all her observations into a single file. She typed them on her computer, making a chart correlating Harper's stiff walking with each Monday. The time the child flinched, the mention of welts, the partial countdown scribbled on her skin, the she counts statement. She scrolled back through the hallway camera footage as well. The school's hallway had a camera that captured partial angles of children entering or leaving the classroom. She noticed that each Friday, Harper seemed to leave with her head bowed, arms crossed, and each Monday, she returned with an even more guarded stance. She took screenshots, attaching them as a rough timeline, though they didn't reveal bruises or welts directly. After finishing, She emailed the entire package to Child Protective Services through the official district channel, labeling it urgent concern, non-accidental physical harm. She included her phone number in case they had questions. Then she sat up late, half expecting an immediate response. None came, but by midday Wednesday, she received a brief message. Unannounced visit scheduled. Additional info needed. That was better than nothing. Usually, the standard reply was, no imminent danger observed. Case closed. She felt a flicker of hope that this time, it might yield action. A week later, she heard through Ms. Allen that social workers had visited Harper's foster home. The caretaker, apparently, was a woman named Lydia, who had fostered a few children previously. She told the social worker that Harper exaggerates bruises from minor discipline. She allowed them to see Harper's room, which was clean and suitable. They found no overt evidence of abuse. The caretaker's explanation was that Harper had rashes from an allergic reaction to laundry detergent. The social worker left, uncertain. Miss C. felt her heart sink. But then, 3 days after that, Miss C. got an email from the same caseworker at CPS asking for more documentation. The caretaker's story apparently didn't fully convince them, especially given the mention of marker writing on Harper's skin. Miss C. was relieved. She scoured every moment she documented, taking additional pictures of what she could observe, though it was tricky without intruding on Harper's privacy. She worried about how the caretaker might retaliate if Harper was pressured. Still, she had to do something. That Sunday, she carefully assembled everything into a PDF, naming it Harper and Held PDF, and sent it to the caseworker. In the meantime, she tried not to let Harper sense the looming investigation. She continued to be gentle, offering the same quiet support. At times, she caught Harper looking at her with a strange mix of gratitude and fear, as if the child suspected Miss C. was stirring trouble. Miss C. wanted to reassure her that it was for her own good, but she didn't want to risk a confrontation. She decided the best approach was to maintain calm compassion. The teacher, Ms. Allen, occasionally raised an eyebrow at how much time Miss C. spent near Harper, but she never scolded. "You're good with the quiet kids," Ms. Allen would say, a note of approval in her voice. Near the end of October, the tension deepened. Miss C. had heard no new updates from the caseworker, but she noticed Harper sporting fresh bruises on her upper arms, partially concealed by her shirt sleeves. She also overheard the child telling a classmate in hushed tones that, "It's my fault," whenever they asked about her limp. The caretaker's methods, whatever they were, seemed to revolve around instilling blame in Harper. Miss C. wrote another note in her log. Harper expresses guilt for injuries. Possible psychological manipulation. One Monday morning in early November, everything came to a head. The children were finishing a simple math worksheet, and Harper's pencil tip broke. She walked up to Miss C. for a sharpener, wincing with each step. The aide asked, "Bad weekend?" in a gentle murmur, half meaning it as a casual question about how children might say bad weekend for not going anywhere fun. Harper nodded, tears suddenly brimming in her eyes. She whispered, "I didn't say sorry in time." She used the spoon again. Then she froze, eyes wide with horror that she'd said too much. Miss C.'s breath caught. "The spoon?" she repeated, feeling cold. Harper just bowed her head, turning away. That sealed Miss C.'s resolve. She typed an immediate follow-up, explaining that Harper had now mentioned a spoon being used as punishment. She noted the welts previously observed. She insisted that an unannounced home check focusing on disciplinary methods was urgent. Finally, she got a more direct response from the caseworker, stating, "We'll coordinate with law enforcement for a potential search of the premises. Please stand by." Miss C. exhaled in relief, though she knew it was far from over. The next day, the caretaker apparently decided to keep Harper home from school. Ms. Allen told Miss C. that the office had received a call claiming Harper was ill. Miss C. felt dread coil in her stomach, fearing the caretaker might suspect an investigation. The child missed the next 2 days as well. By the third absence, Ms. Allen grew concerned enough to call the caretaker, but there was no response. On the fourth day, Harper returned, looking more bruised than ever. She avoided meeting Miss C's eyes. That Friday after school, Miss C checked the hallway cameras again, capturing frames of Harper leaving with a visible limp. She added them to her folder, quietly praying that the authorities would act swiftly. Finally, on Sunday morning, the caseworker informed Miss C that they would do a surprise inspection that evening with local police present. Miss C spent the entire day restless, hoping it wouldn't be too late. Her mind replayed Harper's quiet admission. She used the spoon again. She pictured the caretaker's home, some battered wooden utensil hidden in a drawer, used as an instrument of terror. She wanted so badly to rescue Harper from that environment. On Monday morning, Ms. Allen walked into the classroom with an uncharacteristically grim expression. She pulled Miss C aside, whispering that the caretaker, Lydia, was under investigation. The police and social services discovered a kitchen drawer containing a worn wooden spoon with a splintered handle, apparently used for punishment. They also found a reset chart posted in the laundry room, listing categories like defiance, delay, disrespect, disobedience, each associated with a certain number of spoon strikes. The caretaker had rationalized it as structured discipline, claiming children in foster care needed strict measures. It was monstrous. The authorities had removed Harper from the home that very night. But Ms. Allen continued, they didn't have a new placement ready. She's in a shelter for the moment. Miss C felt both relief and heartbreak. Harper was no longer under Lydia's brutal discipline, but she was shuttled into yet another uncertain environment. She asked if Harper would return to class, but Ms. Allen shrugged. For now, she's placed in a short-term facility. Maybe they'll arrange school there. We'll see. Miss C was left with a hollow ache. She knew the system often struggled to find stable foster homes quickly. November passed without Harper. The class prepared for the upcoming Thanksgiving break, the children buzzing about family gatherings. Miss C went through the motions, assisting Ms. Allen and soothing minor spats among the kids. But she felt Harper's absence like a bruise on her conscience. She wondered if the child was stuck in a group home with older kids, if she was frightened or lonely. She replayed the final words Harper had spoken. I didn't say sorry in time. She prayed Harper wouldn't blame herself for the caretaker's cruelty. Then, one bleak Monday morning in early December, Ms. Allen casually mentioned that Harriet from the front office had heard Harper was being placed with a retired schoolteacher named May. The child might eventually return to Willow Creek Elementary once the new arrangement stabilized, or she might be assigned to a different school closer to May's address. Miss C perked up at the news. A retired schoolteacher taking in a foster child sounded promising, a gentler environment than the chaotic shelter system. She tried to imagine Harper in a quiet house, perhaps with an old cat dozing on the sofa and no reset chart pinned to the wall. The days blurred into holiday season rush. Ms. Allen had the class working on winter-themed art projects, cotton ball snowmen, and construction paper wreaths. Miss C found herself occasionally glancing at the little corner of the rug where Harper used to stand. She missed the child's quiet presence. Some children demanded attention with noise or mischief, but Harper had demanded attention by her very refusal to take up space. Miss C found herself hoping, more fervently than she expected, that Harper was healing somewhere safe. Winter break came and went. The new year arrived with the usual churn of children returning, some excited, some groaning about the end of vacation. Miss C resumed her routine, setting up the morning worksheets and greeting the kids. She still found her thoughts drifting to Harper. Once or twice, she asked Ms. Allen if there was any update, but the teacher had heard nothing more. The caretaker, Lydia, was apparently facing charges for child abuse, though the legal process would take time. Miss C quietly pressed Harriet in the office for any scraps of info. Harriet had only a vague rumor that Harper was adjusting well to Ms. May's home, maybe a half-hour drive from Willow Creek. She might come back or might not. Hard to say, Harriet said. Miss C nodded, trying to be content with the knowledge that at least Harper wasn't with Lydia anymore. Mid-February rolled around. The class had a small Valentine's Day celebration. Miss C helped the children distribute little cards to each other's decorated paper bags. She thought about how Harper never had a chance to do that, how she'd left before the winter festivities and missed everything that made the classroom feel like a community. She swallowed the melancholy and focused on the beaming faces of the children who were present. She reminded herself that not every child's story had a neat, happy arc, but sometimes safety was the best one could hope for. Then, unexpectedly, in mid-March, Ms. Allen told Miss C she'd gotten word from Harriet that Harper might be returning for a brief visit, possibly to ease her transition back into a typical school environment. Ms. May wanted to see if Harper could reacclimate to the classroom she had started in, or if it would be better to place her in a smaller specialized setting. Miss C felt a jolt of anticipation and apprehension. She wondered how Harper might look now. Had she grown? Was she still frightened by physical contact? On a sunny Friday in March, near the end of the day, the classroom door opened. In stepped Harriet from the office, followed by a slim older woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, and behind them, half hidden, was Harper. She wore new sneakers that actually fit, her hair in tidier pigtails, and a small backpack slung over one shoulder. Miss C inhaled sharply, heart pounding. She could see Harper scanning the room, uncertain. Ms. Allen greeted them politely, while the other students stared, curious about the new arrival. Ms. Allen explained that Harper used to be in this class. A few children recognized her, calling her name softly. Harper's eyes flicked around until they landed on Miss C. They locked gazes for a moment. Miss C forced herself to keep her expression calm, not to rush forward and smother the child with attention. She watched Harper step further in, May gently guiding her elbow. Ms. Allen introduced May to Miss C, saying, "May is Harper's new foster mother. She's kindly brought her for a short visit." May shook Miss C's hand, offering a warm, "Nice to meet you. Harper's told me a little about your kindness." Miss C's throat tightened. She smiled faintly, replying that she was glad to see Harper again. Harper remained mostly silent, her gaze darting around the classroom. But Miss C noticed subtle changes. Harper's posture was still cautious, yet not as rigid. Her arms weren't wrapped protectively around herself. She looked older, more sure of her personal space. Ms. Allen invited Harper to join the class for a quick circle time. Harper nodded hesitantly. The children formed a circle on the rug, Ms. Allen reading a short story about spring flowers. Miss C held her breath, watching. Harper paused at the edge of the rug. For a moment it seemed she might remain standing. Then she slowly knelt, crossing her legs. She didn't settle in all the way, more like perched on the edge. But it was progress. After the story, Ms. Allen allowed free drawing time. Harper hovered near a table, uncertain. Miss C gently invited her to sit down with two other girls who were coloring. Harper approached, set her bag down, and slid into a chair. She winced slightly, but Miss C wasn't sure if it was out of habit or actual pain. The child picked a purple crayon, scribbling on a blank sheet. Miss C hovered behind her, letting her work at her own pace. May observed from a distance, conferring quietly with Ms. Allen about potential re-enrollment. The entire scene felt surreal to Miss C, as though a missing puzzle piece had returned. When the short visit ended, Harper rose, clutching her drawing. Miss C noticed it was a simple image. Two figures on a big rug, each with a small black line representing their mouths. She recognized Harper's shaky crayon lines. Harper sidled over to Miss C, holding out the drawing. "I made it for you," she said softly. Miss C felt tears prick her eyes. She took it, noticing in a childlike scrawl, "Now I can sit," drawn beneath the two figures. Miss C murmured, "It's beautiful. Thank you." Harper allowed a small, tentative smile. Then May gently tapped Harper's shoulder, indicating it was time to go. Harper waved a tiny goodbye to Ms. Allen and the class, then slipped out with May. The entire encounter lasted maybe 20 minutes, but it left Miss C reeling with emotion. After the students left that afternoon, Miss C sat at her small desk in the corner, carefully folding Harper's drawing and sliding it into her top drawer for safekeeping. She traced the words with her finger. "Now I can sit." She remembered the first day she noticed Harper refusing to sit for story time. How it all culminated in the revelation of bruises and welts, the caretaker's twisted discipline methods. That one line felt like a triumph. She had to swallow back a wave of tears, thinking about all the children who never got the chance to say, "Now I can," in reference to a normal childhood act. Over the next couple of weeks, Ms. Allen updated Miss C that May was considering re-enrolling Harper at Willow Creek, but it might depend on how stable Harper's condition was. May was older, somewhat set in her ways, but deeply compassionate. She recognized that Harper had some trauma triggers, especially regarding physical contact and any hint of counting or time-based punishments. Ms. Allen said Harriet, from the front office, had spoken to May at length about resources for therapy. Miss C listened with quiet relief. She was simply happy that Harper was in a caring environment where no one was tallying her mistakes with a spoon as a consequence. Then, in late April, they got confirmation. Harper would officially return to room 14 in the next school year. Meanwhile, May wanted to bring Harper for occasional half-day visits to reacclimate her. Ms. Allen and Miss C both agreed to accommodate. Miss C felt her heart surge at the prospect of seeing Harper regularly, in a safer mental state. The caretaker, Lydia, was apparently set to face trial in the coming months, though the details were murky. Miss C tried not to dwell on it. Her priority was Harper's well-being in the here and now. One bright May morning, coincidentally matching the new foster mother's name, Harper arrived for a day-long trial run, wearing new clothes and those same well-fitted sneakers. She clung to May's side initially, but after some coaxing from Ms. Allen, she agreed to join the class for all activities. The children greeted her with mild curiosity, but soon accepted her presence without fuss. Harper's old seat was given to a new student, so Ms. Allen found a new desk for her near the middle of the room. Miss C watched closely as Harper tested each routine: morning circle, seat work, recess, lunch. She noticed the child was quieter than most, but not as painfully stiff as before. She actually parted from May with only a small wave, letting the older woman sit at the back as an observer. When story time came, the students migrated to the big rug. Miss C held her breath, remembering all the times Harper refused to sit. This time, Harper walked with them. She paused at the rug's edge, scanning the room, possibly recalling her old habit of standing. Then she glanced over at Miss C, who offered an encouraging nod. Slowly, Harper lowered herself to the rug, crossing her legs with care. She didn't seem in pain. She sat through the entire read aloud, eyes on the teacher. When the story ended, she didn't bolt upright or shift uncomfortably. She simply remained seated, as if it no longer stung. Miss C crouched beside Harper, whispering, "You doing okay?" Harper nodded, her eyes still on the teacher. She whispered back, "No more counting." Miss C exhaled a shaky breath, recalling the caretaker's countdown that accompanied the spoon. She gently touched Harper's shoulder. "That's right. No more counting." Harper gave a tentative smile. Miss C almost laughed with relief. She recalled the last line of Harper's picture. "Now I can sit." It was happening right here. After school that day, the class packed up to leave. May approached Ms. Allen to talk about how the day went, while Miss C knelt by Harper. "How do you feel about coming back next year?" she asked quietly. Harper shrugged, but there was a gleam in her eyes. "It's okay," she whispered. Miss C patted her hand lightly, mindful not to startle her. "I'm so proud of you," she said. Harper's gaze flicked up, and she smiled the smallest, sweetest smile. That afternoon, once the kids were gone, Miss C lingered in the empty classroom, tidying the desks. Ms. Allen had left for a faculty meeting. Miss C found herself opening her desk drawer, retrieving Harper's crayon drawing. She studied it again. A carpet, a book, two people side by side, and that phrase. She recalled how she'd once found Harper standing in the back, arms folded, eyes darting as if bracing for an impact. Now she'd watched the child sit on the rug with minimal fear. The transformation might seem subtle to an outsider, but to Miss C, it was monumental. She realized that sometimes children who endured such punishments never fully recovered the simple trust needed to sit in a circle without worry. That Harper was well on her way signaled a miracle of sorts. May invited Miss C to dinner at her house the following week, an offer Miss C found surprising but warm. She rarely mingled with students' families outside of events or parent conferences. But May said it might help Harper see that school staff could be a friendly presence in her new life. Tentatively, Miss C agreed, feeling a mix of nerves and curiosity. On a Wednesday evening, she drove her old sedan to the address May provided, a modest one-story house with a small garden of tomato plants in the front yard. The sun was setting, bathing everything in orange light. May greeted her at the door with a wide smile, her gray hair in a neat bun. She wore a flowery apron dusted with flour. Inside, the house felt cozy, pictures of cats and potted plants in the corners. Harper peeked from behind a doorway, as if not entirely sure how to welcome Miss C outside of the classroom setting. Miss C smiled softly, saying hello. Over the next hour, they shared a simple meal of cornbread, roasted vegetables, and iced tea. May chatted about how she used to teach second grade in a nearby district, how she missed the children after retirement, and how she decided fostering might be the next step to continue helping kids. Miss C admired her gentle, steady demeanor. She could see why Harper had begun to relax here. Harper barely spoke during dinner, but she sat at the table, occasionally munching on cornbread with a small appetite. Miss C noticed no signs of flinching or that stiff posture. She asked Harper about her day, and the child answered with a few soft words, mentioning how a new friend in class liked to draw cats, too. Miss C felt her chest swell with cautious optimism. After dinner, May insisted on showing Miss C the small bedroom she'd set up for Harper. Tidy, with pastel walls, a small stuffed bear on the bed. She explained that she avoided using any form of forced discipline, preferring gentle reminders if Harper acted out. She hasn't caused any trouble, May said quietly, but she does get nightmares sometimes. I keep a little night light on. She seems to find comfort in that. Before Miss C left, Harper tugged her sleeve. Thanks for coming, she whispered. Miss C knelt to Harper's level. Thank you for having me, she replied. I'm really proud of how far you've come, Harper. I hope you feel safe here. Harper nodded. For a split second, she leaned forward and brushed her forehead against Miss C's shoulder in what might have been the beginning of a hug. Then she stepped back, as if uncertain how to proceed. Miss C felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes. She ruffled Harper's hair gently. See you at school soon, she said, forcing a steady voice. In the car, Miss C let out a long breath, thinking back to the battered spoon, the marker lines counting down. She thanked whatever cosmic forces that had aligned to bring Harper to May's doorstep. The caretaker, Lydia, would face consequences, though Miss C had little interest in the details. She cared only that Harper was free from that environment. The child might still carry scars, but at least now she had a chance to heal. Over the next few weeks, Harper joined the class for more half-day visits, gradually extending her time. Miss C noticed how the child formed a tentative bond with two girls who liked quiet activities, puzzles, coloring pages, building small structures out of plastic blocks. The teacher, Ms. Allen, marveled at how Harper had changed from a frightened figure to a calmer presence. Miss C took satisfaction in small moments, Harper raising her hand to answer a simple question, or quietly giggling when a classmate made a silly joke. She still didn't talk much about her past, and no one pressed her. They let her ease into normalcy at her own pace. Toward the end of the school year, Ms. Allen organized a small field trip to the local community garden, hoping to show the children where vegetables grew. May volunteered as a chaperone, bringing Harper along. Miss C accompanied them, too. As the kids wandered the rows of leafy greens, squealing at earthworms or chasing after butterflies, Miss C saw Harper kneeling in the dirt, gently touching the leaves of a tomato plant. May stood behind her, explaining how she grew tomatoes at home. Harper's face lit with a fragile sense of wonder. Miss C smiled to herself, thinking how different this was from the hush of the caretaker's house, where a spoon and a chart dictated Harper's every movement. Finally, the last day of school arrived. Harper only attended the morning portion, but she joined the class for a final circle time. Ms. Allen read them a fun story about summer adventures, and the children took turns sharing what they might do over break. Harper said, "I'll help Ms. May in her garden," in a small voice that carried more confidence than Miss C had ever heard. After that, the kids were dismissed early. Harper lingered behind, glancing around the emptying room as though storing up memories. Miss C gave her a nod, letting her take her time. May waited politely at the door, smiling. When Harper finally walked over to Miss C, she held up another drawing. This one depicted a garden scene. A big, round sun overhead, a child next to a taller figure near some plants. The child had a small spoon in her hand, crossing it out with a big red X. A sign read, "No more spoons." Miss C felt her heart clench. She recognized it as Harper's way of saying she was free from that punishment. "Thank you, Miss C," whispered. Harper looked up at her, eyes shining with relief. Then Ms. May gently guided her out the door. Miss C stood there for several long moments, tears threatening as she realized Harper was truly moving forward. The child who once stood, refusing to sit, had found a place where sitting didn't hurt. After the school bus left, Ms. Allen parted for the summer. Miss C stayed behind to stack chairs and straighten the desks, an unspoken ritual of closure for the year. She picked up a few leftover crayons from the floor, stuffed stray worksheets into the recycling bin, and turned off the classroom lights. Then she slipped into the small anteroom where she kept her personal items. She opened the desk drawer, pulled out the 2 drawings Harper had given her, the first with the words, "Now I can sit," and the second with the crossed-out spoon. She placed them side by side, noticing how the first was more hesitant in its lines, while the second had bolder strokes. Miss C let out a shaky breath, overwhelmed by the meaning behind these childlike scrawls. She knew that some children didn't scream or fight or break down in obvious ways. They just withdrew, hoping someone would notice the weight they carried. Harper had been one of those kids, standing at the back, arms folded, eyes darting. Without speaking, she had signaled her pain in the only ways she could, through flinches, stiff walking, quietly not sitting. Miss C felt a blend of pride and sorrow for how close that pain had come to being missed or dismissed. If she hadn't pressed, if she hadn't documented, if the caseworker had believed Lydia's lies, Harper might have remained in that grim cycle of fear. But now, the final image she had of Harper was a child who could at last sit cross-legged on the rug, unafraid of a countdown or a spoon. Miss C gently folded the drawings and placed them back in the drawer, determined to keep them as a testament to hope. She turned off the overhead light, letting the dim glow of the late afternoon sun fill the classroom. Then she stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already and subscribe for more.